Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to this webinar that we planned um, especially for custom lighting using the Coohom rendering engine, which is a great tool for everyone. Today we'll be covering a very specific topic, which is using the custom light templates that Coohom Lights and using them to our advantage in order to get a photorealistic rendering. The first thing that I want to mention is that in order to set the lights in any project, you have to understand the light physics and how the lights actually work and what does each light actually do when it comes to rendering a photorealistic image. This is a project we'll be covering today. As you guys can see, this is a bedroom project. Right now it is empty, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But as you can see, this is a very, very simple area with a large window that will allow a lot of natural light to come in. And in a minute, you'll see how easy it can be to render a realistic image just by using one light. Before getting started, I want to mention that the light template that we'll be using today is natural daylight, which is probably my go-to when I choose to do a light in a daylight scene like the one we're doing today. So let's get started. The first thing that I wanted to explain is the sun. All right, the sun in Coohom is a very, very useful tool. You have to understand that this is the sun right here. Okay, we have it here. Right now it is at 63 degrees and 75 degrees height. We can move the sun, and this will make the sun shade or the sun shadow move as we move it. We set it back at 63. And when you move it, the elevation automatically sets at 44. So let's get to 75 where we were. And one important thing to note is that the sun will not illuminate. It will just create the effect of the sun trespassing the window and leaving the mark in whatever surface it bounces, all right? So in this case, we're aiming for a daylight illumination, and the time is around 12 p.m. when the sun is at its highest point. So let's set it at 75. The azimuth degree doesn't really matter. It just use it to your advantage, and you can actually move the center of the sun like this. Wherever you want the shadow to be reflected in the rendering, you can affect where the sun center, if you can call it like that. The brightness, I use the 40%, which is the standard when it comes to rendering. And this is the color of the sun. Depending on the time we're using for the rendering, we want to change the color. For example, for a sunset scene, we will go for around 4,500. But tonight we're doing a daylight, so we're going to use 6,500, which is what I normally use for daylight scenes. Having explained the sun, let's talk about the lights that come on any light template. This is the rectangular light, all right? This is a very useful light, and it's probably the light that you will be using the most, especially for daylight scenes like this one. And you can see how I use them. As we have one single window, we only have one source of light. So this is where most of the light will come in this rendering. The light should not be bigger. The size of the light affects the brightness. For example, it's not the same. A light like this, of this size, on 920% brightness is not the same as one of this size. So consider that when using a rectangular light, the smaller the light is, the powerful the brightness has to be. In this case, we're using 920% for the brightness, and you'll see how it looks in a second. The circular light is very similar. It just has a circular shape. The spotlight is similar to the Ies lights we have here. It just has one cone, and the OmniLight is used, for example, a floor lamp in which this floor lamp illuminates in all the degrees in the sphere motion, and this one's the light that you want to use for that. The volumetric lights are quite complex to use and understand. We will not be covering these lights right now. This can be in a separate webinar because these lights are just for an effect. They do not illuminate, they just create an effect similar to this one, for example. Let me show you real quick. Like, hold on 1 second and I'll show you what it is. This effect right here, hold on 1 second. This effect right here, it's like a blur. It's created with a volumetric light. It's not necessary right now because this was a sunset scene, and normally when the sun comes down, this effect is created. And this time, we will not be using them. And finally, the Ies Lights. These are files that contain how a spotlight actually reflects, how actually the actual cone of the spotlight is searched in a file and then translated into a photorealistic effect that showcases in the rendering. For example, I normally use Spotlight 14, which is this one, and it has a very nice cone, but there are plenty of them. For example, this one right here, the Downlight 2, also has a large cone that covers more surface than this one, for example. And this is something that you have to consider when illuminating a scene. The bigger the scene is, the wider the cone should be in order to illuminate more surface. Having said that, let's talk about the environmental brightness. Coohom has a set of pre-established backgrounds, and you should choose a matching background for the scene that you are creating. For example, if you are like designing this bedroom, I want this bedroom to be cohesive with the background. For example, this one right here is down. If I rotate this, I'll find the best angle it has in order to get the best. For example, I like this one right here. If you can lower the brightness to have a better look at it. But I like this, for example, I like this buildings right here. I want these buildings to show on my rendering. And the brightness, this is very special because depending on the greater the value is, the more the room will be illuminated. I like to use 3.4 for daylight scenes, which is a bright light, almost burned, but that's how it actually looks in a picture. This one, I use it for sunset scenes. I use this one for houses that have a single level because this one is like the level you see is like a floor level. Let's go with town at 3.4 because we want the background to illuminate the interior scene. There are some advanced settings that you have to turn on in order to get a more realistic rendering. The color correction is activated by default. What it does is maybe reduce the burn from the lights outside and create a more realistic rendering. The impact highlights means that Whatever spotlight you use will reflect on those materials that can reflect light. For example, this stone right here, which is a marble, the ambient occlusion is the number of times the light bounces on a surface in order to create a shadow. This one is at 0.3 and 100 by default, and you can play with it in order to get a more realistic effect. And finally, the specular reflection is very useful when you have mirrors in your scene. What it does is reflect the items in front of the mirror and invert it, like if it was like reflecting in a mirror, and that allows, it takes a little bit more time to render, but when it comes to realism, it is totally worth it. You cannot now when setting the lights, I like to have a methodology when doing it, because doing something organized will produce an organized outcome. For example, the first thing that I do is enter the custom. For example, if we set, I click in customize, all right? And I always go with natural daylight. If we open this template, it will have some lights set up like by default. Confirm. Let's enter the 2D view. And it does not have any lights by default. That's weird, but it normally has lights laid around like by default, like something like this. And what you want to do is delete all the lights that it comes with and start from scratch. All right. The first thing that I do is test the sun. Is the first thing that I do just to see how the sun will affect my rendering. The sunlight, let's turn it on. And if we move the sun as we had it at 63 and 75 brightness, that's all right. This is the first thing that I do, just the sun. And then after I've done it, I center my shot and I take a render. This is the first render that I take in order to start setting up the lights. Let's wait until it does. Now, there are several types of light templates. Public space templates, natural night light, 3.0, warm daylight. And there are some more realistic light templates like indoor daytime, indoor night, that have different features from the natural daylight 3.0. For example, if we click on indoor daytime, we'll enter the customization tool, and you can see that it has one light by default. But the different features that it has over the natural daylight is the automatic exposure, the brightness settings in which you can adjust the indoor brightness. This is also available on the natural daylight. I forgot to say that, but it has some very powerful tools like noise reduction and dazzling. The dazzling is used, for example, when you have a light bulb, and that dazzling effect around the bulb is what the dazzling button does. And the color enhancement is just to improve the color quality. It's on by default, but it can also be turned to zero if desired. And within the advanced features, it's everything the same, but the backgrounds vary from template to template. This one's right here, you can adjust different settings, like for example, the ambient light brightness, in which you can adjust it to match an outdoor scene or to match an indoor scene. You can adjust the tone to cold, nature, and warm. And you can edit the ambient light reflection, which is how the background will reflect into, or how the light will bounce on those materials that can reflect light, like for example, a TV screen or a stone marble, a marble slab or a table, mirrors, glass, etc. This is on 2.0 by default, but you can also play with this and make your scene look more realistic. Now, having mentioned this, let's get back to natural daylight, which is our first. Hold on. Yes, this one. Now, this one is the rendering just with the sun. You can see that the scene is not well illuminated because we don't have any light source other than the background. And the sun only does this. I mean, this is the sun shade that reflects to the room. And it makes sense because we're aiming for a scene on a 12, like in 12 o'clock in the afternoon, like 1 p.m. in the afternoon. That's the scene we're seeking for. And that's the light setting we'll seek for when doing this rendering. Now, having taken this rendering, we want to go back to our lights editor and turn on the first light. The first or the primary light is the rectangular light that I mentioned before. This light has the same dimensions the window has, and it's behind the glass. It can also be located on front, depending on how many objects or components are blocking the light. But this time, we will be using it behind the glass, right here. And the color would go for 6,300, brightness 920. And that's it for now. Now, once I have this light, I take a secondary rendering, which is this one right here. Now, this is the scene with just one light. Remember, we only have the sun activated and the natural and the rectangular light right behind the glass, which is our primary source of light. After I've done this, I start decorating. Of course, I already have this scene decorated for the sake of the duration of this video. But let's start, like, for example, with the curtains. Let me hide all this. And we will only leave the curtains. And you'll see how just the curtains affect the rendering. Now let's get back to the rendering engine. And I already have this render taken. Now let's get back to this first rendering. Now, if I only have the curtains, this is the rendering with the curtains. Now let's get back without and with the curtains. And you can see how the light is affected by the components inside, and the light is affected by those components that are in front of it and block the input of light. Now, the second render after this, I just start throwing things into the scene and seeing how they affect the light. Like those things that cannot be moved from the rendering, like for example, the wall paneling in this one right here. Let me disappear this, the decorations, and this one right here. Now, this is my side tables and the slats that were custom modeled using SketchUp. And this is something that I will cover in a minute. This bed wall was used, you can find it in the Coohom library. When you search for wall, there are tons of walls that you can use for your projects, like for different environments, such as bedrooms, living rooms. This one has a nice, hold on, I lost it. Well, that one had a nice fireplace. This one already has a TV, but there are tons of walls and components that you can use and adjust depending on your project. For example, if you click on R and then deactivate the scale, you can modify the scale of this component in order to fit your project. You don't necessarily have to use the original size. You can adjust the size just by click or deactivating the scale button and using the arrows. This time I'll use it like this because it perfectly fits the space between the slats. And this is the second render that I take. And this is very impressive. Look at this. I have not modified the lights so far. This is the same light outside the window, which is bringing me all this light. And let's compare it to the first rendering. And this is why I do it like in this organized way in order to understand how the lights work. Now, this is the first rendering. This is the second rendering with the curtains. And this is the third rendering with the back wall and the side tables. Now, one special feature that I like about the rectangular light is how it creates shadows. Look at this. This is a shadow created by the rectangular light, and it's very realistic. This is a shadow created by the rectangular light, and it's also very realistic. And this is something that you'd find in a real scene, in a real bedroom. That's why the rectangular light is so important for this project and for most projects, to be honest. Now, let's compare to the first rendering and the third rendering. And you can see how the light is immediately decreased just by using this component, because the light is bouncing on different surfaces and it's getting dispersed by the bounce. Now, the third thing that I like to do on all my projects is choosing the right light pendants or light fixtures. Let's get it back, and let's hide this, and let's hide this. Now, I've chosen these light features that you can find on Coohom. If you search very well and you search onto the last page, I have a curated selection of photorealistic models or components found on Coohom. I have over almost 4,000 components that I've found over the time and saved because they look realistic and they can be useful for future projects. This is something that I do recommend. If you see a component that you like, save it. Like, it's gonna be hard to find it again. And if you have it saved on your favorites, it's gonna be way easier. These light pendants and this light fixture right here are available in Coohom. And what I did was changing the materials to match those over the side tables. For example, if you take a look right here, this is the actual material that this pendant light has. What I did was replacing the materials with some realistic materials, like for example, for the shades, I like to use this one right here, which is not a plastic, but it works. And if you use the material right here, this is a white, very glossy material that looks like plastic or like glass, but it's actually a stone. And this is one of my favorite tricks, like for pendant lamps. Let's click on done, and that's all for now. Now, having chosen the light fixtures, you can see how they all are connected. These light fixtures are similar to this one right here and this one right here over the table. So it's all about creating a cohesive environment. It's all about creating a cohesive scene for the client to see how it will actually look and how realistic it looks. And the client will only expect the real thing to look like the rendering. And that's the trick when selling a interior design project. Now that we have chosen the light fixtures, let's take a rendering again. And this is that rendering. Now let's get back to the first rendering and then the fourth, which is the one with the light fixtures. And you can see how the light has immediately changed, and I have not touched it again. You can see how realistic that material that I just mentioned looks, and it's a stone, but it's all about thinking outside the box, to be honest. These are 4K renderings, by the way. These are not standard. Now, this is probably one of the final steps, and is choosing the right component or the right furniture to match the realism of the scene you have already created. The scene, in my experience, all projects will look more realistic when there's nothing in them. And once you start using different types of furniture, it starts decreasing on realism because not all components are well materialized. Now, let's get back to this. And this is the bed that I've chosen for this project. I also changed the materials for it in order to match the overall color palette. We've chosen this bed right here, this ottoman right here, and this is the side where the TV is. This was also custom made in SketchUp and then imported as a SKP model. And once imported, you can modify the materials using Coohom's material library and match those within the scene. Now that we have the furniture, which is a great part of the light, obstruction, let's call it like that. Now that the bed is placed, you will see how the light coming from this window will bounce on the bed and not reach very well this corner. But let's not worry about that because this is what will actually happen in the real thing, in the real room. This is how light actually behaves. So let's take a look at how it looks. Now, this one is the rendering without the bed, and this one is the rendering with the bed. And you can see how the light coming from the window, from the rectangular light that, let's recall, I have not modified yet, is bouncing on this side of the bed and not reaching very well this corner. But even though it does not look as illuminated as this side, it still looks realistic because, as I said before, this is what will happen in the real room. This is how lights actually behave, and this is how you can achieve a photorealistic rendering just by understanding how lights work, and just by understanding how the light's physics behave when rendering a scene. Finally, I like to decorate my scenes. I already have these decorations chosen and hidden because just to save time. But let's use an area rock, some glasses and decorations for the side table, some flowers to bring the life in, a magazine that the decorations sometimes are used to live up a scene and to make it look like someone actually lives there. But let's not confuse it with using a lot of decorations, but because depending on the design style, using lots of decorations can make your rendering look unrealistic. This time we have chosen some very minimal decorations just to create a lively scene, something like if someone actually lived here. And let's see how it looks once all the decorations have been placed. This is that rendering. This is how the decorations look. As you can see, I have chosen some realistic components. This is the magazine. This is how the light pendant looks. You can see how the light pendants have a reflection on it, and that's very cool. You can see this glass right here, how it deflects the light, the reflection on the slats before, on the slats behind. This is just a decoration found on Coohom that I thought looked quite cool. And let's take a look back at the first rendering just to make some memories. And this is the final rendering for that scene. Boom. You can see that only one light did all the job. Only one light is necessary to brighten up a scene. Now, I have to admit that this scene is very basic, and I was lucky that I had this large window to bring the light in. But sometimes there are not windows and there are not great source of light. So that's when the tricks comes in, and that's when the mind gets an important role when understanding where to how do I say that? Where to extract the light from. I mean, where does the light come from realistically? And then this is something that we can cover in a future webinar, like for example, a nighttime illumination, which is totally different because as you can see here, these spotlights are turned off. Why are they off? Because it's daytime and there's no reason for them to be on, and there's enough light coming in from the window on this wall. So the spotlights are right here, but they are turned off because logically during the daytime the spotlights or the lights should be off, as well as the pendant lights. This is something that I also modified. It's quite easy to do. This is a component. Let's enter in the material editor and see how it actually looks. The original material for these lights normally come turned on with a luminous material. If I reset this material right here, this is the original material. Now, if I want to turn it off, I go to plastic, for example, and click on transparent UV soft. And this should be like a plastic material that resembles the material when the lights are turned off. And that's how you turn off a spotlight. Oh, cancel. Let me check real quick my annotations. All right, let's talk about the ceiling. And this is probably something that you noticed in the first place. This ceiling was not made using Coohom because I find it much easier to do it in a separate software such as SketchUp. However, this is something that you can do using the ceiling editor. And this is not something that I usually do because I find it way easier to model a ceiling component and then import it into Coohom and then change the materials. But if you take a look at this is the original file from SketchUp. As you can see, the slats were modeled, the side tables were modeled. The ceiling was also modeled. Hold on one second, it lagged. The TV unit was also modeled. This is a TV unit that you just saw, and the ceiling was also modeled to fit this specific project. It is a very simple model, and it has two materials: the white, which is the white paint used for the ceilings, and this light strip right here is painted in yellow. Once imported, I enter the material editor and replace the materials, and that's it. I use a white paint for the ceiling, and if I go inside or click right here where the yellow is, I will be able to change this material. Now, there are tons of already uploaded luminous materials, such as this one. This one, for example, is pink. This one is a bright yellow, white, blue, and so on. There are tons of already uploaded materials, but you can also upload this kind of materials. Like, let's go back to this rendering. There is something that I do not like about this rendering, and it is this light right here, these LED strips located in the ceiling that I modeled are quite white, and I don't like these accent lights to be that white. Now, and this is a special trick of the chart that I will show you. If we go to Coohom right here, hold on, and enter the personal library, we are going to be able to upload our own textures as well as models. This is all the models that I have uploaded using SketchUp. And I definitely recommend learning SketchUp in order to improve the render quality on Coohom, because when you combine both softwares, the end result is astonishing, to be honest. If we go to textures and upload a new texture, let's say that I want to upload a light, a luminous material, which is not that wide, but it's not orange. Upload from computer. The image that I want to upload is this one called yellow orange. If I click on it and then open it, it will upload to the server and then pop up right here. There it is. Now, there are several types of material categories. And this one right here, a luminous material, is fine right here. Others, luminous materials. And then we go to advanced settings and change the brightness of that material. For example, the brightness that I'm looking for, and this is something that I know because I have uploaded tons of luminous materials, but the number that I'm going for is 6.5. This is the energy of that light. It means how bright the light will be once uploaded and once rendered. Let's click on 3D model materials to avoid the dimensions and upload texture. I will not upload this one because I have already done it. But if we go to the material editor again and enter in the ceiling, edit, material editor, and then I go to my uploaded materials right here, uploads, and I click on the yellow component that I have here, and I click on this one, yellow orange. This will automatically replace the old material with this new material that I have uploaded, and then I click on done. If I render this one right here, you'll see how it looks different. It looks more warm, which is the tone that I'm looking for this project. Once this render produces, let's talk about custom imported materials or components from SketchUp. As I was mentioning before, this is a very powerful tool. Coohom itself is a very, very powerful rendering engine. But when you match it or when you pair it with a different software such as SketchUp or 3ds Max, it automatically improves your render quality because you are able to create custom furniture for your custom projects. Now, let's take this component right here, and this is probably another webinar we can do later, which is advanced 3D modeling techniques for photorealistic renderings, something that just came to my mind. This component right here was modeled using SketchUp, then saved as a group, and then imported into Coohom. As I was mentioning before, if we go to this personal library and then upload a model, you can only import files from Max, RAR, zip, FBX, and SKP, which is the file we will be uploading tonight. Let me go real quick to the project. And this one's the component that I'm importing, bed wood slats. It will take a time depending on the size of the file to upload and depending on your internet speed. You can get to choose where this component belongs, and it will upload, then render, and once it renders, it will be available on your uploaded components right here. Uploads. Let me wait until it loads, until it renders. Depending on the complexity of each model, it will take more time to render. For example, if you are uploading an entire kitchen, it will take more time to render than a side table, for example. It normally takes this time. It is normal because the Coohom software, the Coohom server is rendering the model. And once it renders, you can click on Submit Model, check Models, and it's still rendering right here. Once it renders, it will be available on your Uploads tab. As I said, I normally upload a lot of models for my projects, models that I custom models for the projects that cannot be found in Coohom, because Coohom has a great selection of components, but sometimes some furniture has to be custom designed in order to fit in a specific project. Now that it has rendered, we go to my account, uploads, and it should be available like this. These are the slabs. I already have them, and I already have the materials on them, and that was just to show you how to import a model from SketchUp. It's quite easy, quite simple, and it really makes a difference when taking a photorealistic rendering. Now, the more furniture, the more components a scene has, the more time it will take the render to produce. All right. This render right here, which is an empty render, was faster than this one that already has the bed, the ottoman, the side tables, the light fixtures, the decorations. And it's normal because the rendering engine is processing more items, is processing more polygons. And the more polygons a scene has, the more it takes to take the render. So don't freak out when your render does not produces as fast as you will expect. Now, here we have it. And let's see the difference between the lights before and the lights after we did the change. This is a rendering before with the light that I didn't like, that was maybe too white for me, that I then uploaded a different luminous material, and this is the result. You can see how it looks warmer, it looks more realistic, and it looks how it should look in the real bedroom once executed as an interior design project. Now, this is one of my personal tricks. I really liked sharing it with you guys. I hope you find a better way to use it and then tell me. But you can now see how easy it is to create a LED strips using SketchUp as a complementary software. There are also a feature within Coohom to create an LED strip. I have not used it because, as I said before, I prefer to use SketchUp. I find it faster for me because I normally handle from 10 to 12 projects a month, and I like to work fast. And this is a way that I work faster. Now, Coohom has some built-in features that I'll show you right now. And it's a feature that not everyone knows about. It's a feature that not everyone's talking about lately. And it's something that I really, really, really like. And I'll share with you guys right now. Let's take this render, for example, this one right here. This one is already in 4K resolution, and you only want to do this once your renderings are in 4K resolution, because the details or the level of details will be greater once in 4K. Now, if we go to edit and then click on beautify, there is a very special tab that you can use in order to improve the render quality. This local tab will load each channel of this image, and then you'll be able to edit a certain material without affecting the rest of the image. It takes a time to download all the channels from this image, but once it does, you'll see what happens. Let's wait until it loads. Let me drink some water because I'm thirsty. It normally takes this long. It's not enough normal. All right. Now you can see how every material has been divided into a different layer, into a different channel. And one thing that I like to do is this texture enhancement tab allows for, it's like a sharpening of just that texture. For example, let's click on 20 on the floor and it will automatically sharpen the floor. And if we go to the carpet, let's click on 20 as well, and it will automatically make the carpet look more realistic. Let's hit on complete. Let's save the image and let's take a look at how it looks. This is especially useful when you use wooden floors or texturized carpets or fabrics or some materials in which you want to create a greater ambient occlusion, if we can call it like that, and improve the quality of the material without importing a high quality material. It takes some time to save because we just modified the channels of this image. But once it does, you'll see the difference. All right, now let's take a look. You see how different it looks just by modifying that value. Oh, this one right here. Okay. It's just a subtle detail that makes the difference. Now let's compare it to this floor right here. Now save this image in your mind and let's get back to this one, which is the one we modified. It looks more sharp and it looks more realistic, as well as for the carpet under the bed. That's a funny trick that I like to share with my friends using Coohom in order to improve the render quality. And that's a trick that you can use from now on to improve your renderings. Now, to wrap it up, let's talk about photorealistic images. Taking a rendering is as taking a picture with a camera. The engine is as if you were holding a camera with your hands. And when you think like that, you are able to understand how to take a picture in order to look realistic. For example, the field of view, or FOV. You can see how Coohom already has some text right here saying human, which is 30 degrees. 30 degrees is actually the field of view that human eyes have. So the lower the FOV is, the more realistic your rendering will look. It is normally on 60 by default, but I normally don't like to use 60 degrees because the scene looks distorted and somehow stretched, if you can call it like that. Now, if we reduce the FOV to 30, you can see how it automatically closes the FOV and makes for a more realistic field of view. The aspect ratio is something that I also use very commonly. For example, for large scenes where there are a lot of things going on, use 16 by 9, which is the largest format Coohom offers. This time I won't use this aspect ratio because I'm losing too much information on the site, and I don't really want this door right here to show on my rendering and this door right here to show on my rendering. So let's go for 4:3. Let's set it back to default. And this is the image that I want to produce, an image in which all components are seen in a realistic way. And if you were taking a picture from in front of this bed, all right? This is the image taken with 30 degrees FOV. And this is the grid is something that's very useful, very useful when taking a rendering. There are several types of grids. I like to use the golden triangles because it focuses on the center of the image. But normally, when you take a rendering, most of the content should be within this grid, and anything off the grid will not show. And it's a clever way to center and level up your rendering techniques. Now let's take some realistic or some artistic renderings. When taking artistic renderings, I like to go with 3:4, which is a vertical format, like suitable for Instagram stories, TikTok, phones itself. Phones like a phone screen are normally vertical. So the best way to see a rendering on a phone is in this aspect ratio or 9:16. But I find 9:16 quite narrow, to be honest. I like to go with 3:4, sorry. Let's take a photorealistic rendering, like for example, of this bedside table. I already have this angle, so let's save this angle and use it to my advantage. Now, this is a artistic rendering. An artistic rendering differs from an actual rendering because this is a rendering with the sole purpose of serving as an artistic shot to showcase the design, to showcase the modeling, to showcase the lights, brighten up the scene, to showcase the little details that you want your client to see about your work and why your project is better than the rest. Now, if I take this render, I already have it right here. This is the rendering that comes from that shot. You can see how the floor is seen, the wall is seen, and the ceiling is seen in the same rendering and included within the same image. And this allows the client or any person seeing this rendering that it was realistically taken as if it was a picture. Now you can see how the curtains hide. I'm sorry, this is my mistake. This should not show if you want to have or achieve a photorealistic rendering. This is unreal. And I don't know if you guys understand me, but this right here is not accurate. And I'll modify that in order to not show in that rendering. But this rendering right here is an artistic shot. This is an artistic rendering. And it is important to have a well-leveled camera. For example, this camera is at 955 millimeters from the ground. If I were to take a higher rendering, hold on for a second. If I were to take this same image higher up, it will look unrealistic. And if I were to take it lower than the original image, it would look unrealistic as well because it's not well leveled with the scene. Now, finally, the clipping tool that the rendering engine has, and I've seen people that don't really know how to use it, and I'll explain it in this webinar. This is one powerful tool that everyone should use in order to get a realistic rendering. Let's, for example, go back to this rendering right here. You can see how the render is well centered, is within the field of view. The field of view is nice. The lights are good, but do you see this right here? This is the TV unit that is not well clipped from my image. Now, how do I avoid this? Let's save this perspective, go back to my rendering engine and get back to this. Now, this clipping tool allows me to take a wider shot without actually moving the camera. How do I do this? You can see now, hold on one second. This is where the camera is right now. Normally, when you use a reduced FOV such as 30, 35, 40, and 45, you'll find yourself like trapped in the room and not being able to take the rendering because the camera overlaps the wall. In order to avoid this, you click on clip and extend the camera. Now the camera is still here, but we've been able to slide the shot inside the room. If I were to take this render without a clipping, let me just take it just so you can see how it looks. And then with the clipping, if I extend it to the point that I'm comfortable with, like right here, where you can see how when I drag it, I overlap the components in front of a camera until I reach the point in which any component is in front of a camera and not overlapping the shot. Now that I've clipped the image, I click on render. And let's wait until it produces. Finally, and to wrap this webinar up, I like to do some post-production on the images that on the renderings that I take on Coohom. I use a software that is similar to Photoshop. It's called GIMP. It is a free software, very friendly to use, very easy to use, and it's a very powerful software if you're looking to improve your rendering quality. You have to do some post-production on your renderings. This is the rendering without the clipping, and this white burnt image is the wall from outside the room. And now you'll see how the rendering with the clipping looks. This is the same shot with the clipping activated. And you can see that the TV unit still overlaps the image a little bit right here. This is something that can be adjusted in the later rendering, but for the sake of this webinar, I'll leave it like that and hoping that you guys understood what I tried to explain. This is how it looks with the clipping. And let me take one final artistic shot from the TV wall, which is right here. When using the grid, I like to place the most important component on one of the corners. Like for example, we have one corner here, one corner here, one here, and one here. The important subject of your rendering should be located on one of the corners, just as if you were taking an image. In this case, we'll have to use the clipping again, because if we don't, this is the rendering. If we don't use the clipping, if we activate the clipping and then adjust it to a point in which we're comfortable with to take the rendering, which is around here, in which no components are overlapping this rendering, then we can click on render, extra time rendering, because we have the specular reflections on. And let's wait until it pops up. And let's take this rendering right here and let's do some post-production on it in order to improve the lights. Let's download this rendering. Let's head to GIMP, File, Open, Downloads, and let's open this image. Convert. Okay, now that we have the image that we took, the rendering that we did in the Coohom engine, it's time for some post-production. What I like to do is very simple, very simple. Let's affect the curve and let's increase the contrast a little bit. Let's decrease this curve and let's take this up a little bit in order to create a more realistic image. Now let's split the view, and this is the old image and this is the new image. This is just by modifying the curve, the contrast, the color curve. Now, if we wanted this scene to look a bit more warm, let's increase the temperature a little bit, just enough to match the color palette. This is the old image, and this is the new image. It's a very subtle change, but it's there and it's noticeable. Let's increase the exposure a little bit. Just maybe not, maybe leave it like that, because the original exposure from the original image is quite good, to be honest. So I will not touch the exposure. Let's play with the shadows a little bit. If I increase this right here, you can see how the shadows in this corner start to disappear. And this is a very clever way to avoid those weird shadows on your projects. This is the old image. Let me increase it just a little bit more. This is the old image. This is the new one. You can see the difference right here in this ottoman and in this corner right here, where the sun, where the light from the window, which is the rectangular light I talked at the beginning of this webinar, is not reaching very well. Now, this is the old image and this is the new image. Again, this is a very subtle change, but it does make a difference, trust me. These are the highlights. This normally affects those white spots. In this case, I will not play with it much. And this is a common white balance. You can adjust it to a point in which you're comfortable with, like right here. This is the old image and this is the new image. Finally, let's decrease the contrast, like 2 points, to decrease the dark spots. And finally, but not least, let's sharpen this image just a bit to make it look more realistic. And we'll see the difference right here, for example. These are just subtle details that, as I said before, make a small difference, but when combined, it really makes a difference when making a realistic rendering. We can increase the amount if we want it to look better. There it is. I'm comfortable with this, and I will click the OK button, and that should be it for this rendering. One little trick that I like to do for this kind of images in which I want, do you guys remember the dazzling effect that I mentioned on the indoor daytime illumination set and template? The natural daylight does not have this effect, but you can create this effect using these photo editing tools such as Gameport, Photoshop. What it will do is create like a dazzling effect coming from the window. This time it's not showing very well because the window is white. And it's maybe not working this time as the window is white. Oh, hold on 1 second. It's not on white. There you go. Now that you have it in white, you should be able to create this. You see this? Now, if we use it like this in a clever way, you kind of create this dazzling effect coming in from the window and making it look more realistic, as if a lot of light was coming in from the window and creating this burnt effect that you're looking for in this kind of scenes. Let's now save it. Image test at the highest quality possible. I go to downloads. And let me show you real quick the difference between the original image that we downloaded from SketchUp and the image that, hold on 1 second. This is the original image, and this is the image that we just edited in order to look more realistic. Now, this is the image that we downloaded from Coohom, sorry. And this is the image that I just edited. Now, you can see that these are just subtle details, but they make the difference. They make the difference when producing a photorealistic image. They make the difference when impressing your clients. They make the difference when creating a personal portfolio. And it makes the difference. From now on, I'm sure you guys will use some of these tricks to improve your render quality. Your render quality is demonstrated by the quality components that you use, by the quality materials that you use, by the quality modeling that you use, and by the quality lighting that you use. This is the amount of details it has. This is how real it looks. And if you ask me, this looks like an actual photograph. And that's it for now. You guys can check my personal portfolio on my Fiverr page. I have some listed projects that I've, these are all done in Coohom, of course, combined with SketchUp. This is, for example, a kitchen me and my team made a couple of months ago. This kitchen was modeled in SketchUp and then imported to Coohom. And the materials are all from Coohom. This terrazzo material was uploaded by me and then used for this project. These walls were custom made in SketchUp. All this furniture, you can find them in Coohom. This, for example, is a nice loft we did in New York City. These sculptures are available in Coohom. They look extremely good. I love them, and I try to use them in all my projects. This kitchen, of course, was custom designed using SketchUp and then imported to Coohom. This is the bedroom of that loft. These sculptures, decorations, side tables, bed wall are all available in Coohom. And this is a wider shot of that loft. You can take a look at my portfolio. I will send my Fiverr portfolio on the Coohom WhatsApp group and the Telegram group that was just opened. And you'll be able to take a deeper look at this portfolio and these images that have all been taken using the Coohom rendering engine. And that's it for now, guys. And thank you for attending this webinar. I hope this was more than helpful for you. I don't have the lighting option on my render page on it now. If anyone has questions, then leave it on the chat box and I'll try to answer as good as I can.